Welcome to New Home Insights, the podcast from John Burns Research Consulting. I'm your host, Dean Worley. If you want to follow market trends, demographics, capital, new ideas, and endeavors that touch on housing, we're going to try to make sense of that every couple of weeks. Let's go. Hi, everyone. This is Dean Worley with the New Home Insights podcast. Today, we go back to the development side of the real estate business. We're going to have a chat with Brent Herrington. He's a partner, CEO, and president of DMB Development. DMB has been making great communities since the mid-1980s. Brent has been with them since the late 1990s. They started out in Phoenix, where they're still based, but DMB has been active literally all over the country and even overseas as well in Mexico. Brent, how's it going? How you doing?
Yeah, things are good. Thanks, Dean. So DMB was actually founded in 1984.
Yeah.
And the name DMB is the first initials of our three founders. So it's Drew Brown, Mark Sklar, and Bennett Dorrance.
Got it.
And Drew Brown is still chairman of our company and is here with me every day.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about all kinds of aspects of DMB. We're going to talk about kind of your strategy and approach to building great master plans. We're going to talk about a lot about some specific master plans. And we'll wrap it up, spending a few minutes with your new partnership with the Disney Corporation for their Storyliving brand of community. But first, let's expand on what you just did. Let's talk a little bit about the history here of DMB and also Brent Herrington's history when you came aboard DMB to the present.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about that. So just in a nutshell, the DMB organization started out as a diversified real estate company. It was three guys and they were young and, very excited. They found themselves in Phoenix when Phoenix was exploding with growth back in the 80s. And so they did work in the office and retail and, it's kind of a mixed bag. But somewhere along the way, those of you who are old enough to remember the savings and loan crisis and the RTC, the Resolution Trust Corporation, where all the foreclosed assets had to cycle through, and et cetera, et cetera. So those three guys were fortunate enough to be in business when that happened and to have money to go buy some important assets. And so by pure serendipity, one of the assets they bought was the, kind of the remnants of a broken master planned community that another developer had started and ended up in receivership. And so the guys bought it. And so it was just one of many things they were working on at the time. And I think just to compress the story, it's fair to say that they really fell in love with that asset class. For a lot of reasons. One is the ability to control a large land area is so powerful. I remember they used to talk about the biggest problem they had when they were doing one-off little projects was the idiot across the street. So in other words, they'd say, oh, look at this great little corner. We're going to buy that corner. We're going to develop a little office building. And then the idiot across the street screwed things up because, built something stupid or whatever.
Yeah.
So now when you find yourself in control of a vast land area that's mixed use, so there's housing and there's shopping and dining and entertainment and office and whatever. If there is an idiot across the street, just look in the mirror. You're the guy who is setting the whole table here. And so they really became intrigued with it, and it changed the direction of the company from that point forward. And so we very quickly, emerged as one of the country's most prolific developers of very large-scale planned communities.
So that was late 80s, early 90s?
Yeah, and so that chapter of things would have been early 90s.
Okay.
They just progressed from one to another, and now there's 4, and now there's 6, and now there's 8, and now there's 10. And and I'll talk later about kind of the perspective and strategy that DMB embraced as we approach that business. Just quickly, just to deal with my own background. So my first work in the master plan community space was with the Gerald Hines organization at a community in Houston called First Colony. And I think it may have been the only large-scale master plan community that Hines really ever did.
Huh.
And but it was a big one, and it was in Houston, where there are many huge master plan communities. And so, I started as just the lowest of the low, doing grunt work and all the stuff nobody else wanted to do, and had the opportunity to really learn the business from the ground up. If you fast forward a little bit, as my work in the planned community space progressed, I went to work for Disney at Celebration, Florida.
Yeah.
And so that was their first large-scale master plan community. And that was all the way back. We opened that community in 1996.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a chapter of my life working with Disney on that really cool project. And then from there in 1998 back to Arizona, where I joined DMB and have been with DMB ever since. So 27 years.
I did not know you had that connection with Disney prior to this very much more recent connection with
Correct.
Disney, with Celebration. Now, and for the listeners, Celebration was kind of famously maybe a little bit ahead of its time, right? It was sort of a lot of alley loaded, kind of a neo-traditional community when no one was really doing that in the 90s.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. And it was fascinating because in that community, there was a staggering constellation of talent. So like on architecture, I could rattle off the names of the finest architects in the world who all played a role in creating Celebration Florida. And everything about that project was so aspirational. It's interesting that its base wiring is there was a perspective within Disney Development back in that time that it's interesting that if you look around this country, there are a handful of just loved, small cities, large towns that the decades and the centuries have come and gone, and places like Charleston and Savannah and Annapolis, Maryland, and Alexandria, and these places are so loved and they prosper through the decades. And so their objective was to give a very serious study to what is it exactly about those places? What do they have in common? It's like reverse engineering.
Yeah.
Let's go understand
time in a sense, right?
Right. It's like what makes them so successful? Why do people love them so much? Figure that out and then bring that genetic code to this new community that we're going to create in the shadow of Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that was informative. Let's do this. Let's talk first before we get into some I guess, for lack of a better term, sort of your brands, because you're in some different niches here, and I kind of define them as who your buyers are. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit more 30,000 foot of your approach to making that perfect master plan community. Let's start with this. When you look at a piece of dirt, are you very conscious of what has happened before, the story, the history of that piece of land? Is that something that sort of guides your planning? Or are you just looking to, let's do what works best regardless?
No, absolutely. And I appreciate that question, because I think the world of developers really divides on the question you just asked. In other words, there's a lot of developers who would look at a piece of land and the question is, what's working in the market and how can we do more of that?
Okay.
Right. And they basically kind of have a formula and they do what they do. And then the other, which would be in the category that DMB is in, it's the opposite, that we're passionate about the idea of localness. Mm-hmm. I had a mentor who used to describe it as irreducible localness. So in other words, it's not just, this is so California. Well, California is a big place. Well, it's so Southern California. Well, that's also a big place. It's like, right? Yeah. And so, South Orange County is very, very different from Irvine, is very, very different from LA, is very, And so you just keep zooming in and understanding in a very authentic way this place where this land is, its history, its culture. Learn to love it the way the locals love it and for the reasons the locals love it. And so we're definitely in that category. But look, Dean, I think the thing that I would say that probably best encapsulates DMB's approach, it's based on the realization that most residential development isn't in big master plan communities. The master plan communities are just a small fraction of the total new home delivery in the United States in any given year. And if you think of it, most residential development is in small tracts. It's just builder subdivisions, or it's a little condo property, or whatever it may be. And the developer's experience with that property is very quick. So you get hold of it. It may represent a year or two of supply. So in other words, maybe it's a 120 unit single family subdivision, or it's a 75 unit townhouse project, or whatever. And so the thinking about it is very transactional. It is, in other words, it is, we are going to assess the market, make our decision about what product to do here, what quality level, what price point. We're going to place our bets. We're going to build it. We're going to sell it. We're going to hopefully do well on it and get out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
In a master plan community, there is a profoundly different mindset that becomes possible. And what that is the realization that this big master plan community may take 10 or 15 years, or in some cases more than that, to work through. And if you, as the developer, do the right things, care enough to craft something really special, and focus on placemaking, on neighborhood design, on creating housing products that are differentiated in the market. You focus on what's called the soft infrastructure of a community, the social and civic and cultural doings of the community. That if you really put all that effort and energy into it on the front end, you'll open and you may be achieving just a modest premium over, other undifferentiated product in the market. But fast forward 2 or 3 years, and this community starts to kind of grow into its own. It's becoming a place. It starts to have a reputation. It starts to be a place that, Dean, if you went one weekend and bought a home at this lovely master plan community, go back to work on Monday and say, hey guys, guess what? My wife and I bought a house. Really? Where did you buy? Oh, well, it's at this community. And they go, ooh, nice. Because everybody's heard of it.
Yeah.
And so it's getting better and better and better with every passing year as it grows into its shoes.
Yeah.
And the premium keeps rising. And then you get into the last third of the community's life, which again could still be, depending on the scale, it could be several thousand homes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're really in the pay zone now. Yeah. Where any home that you can deliver within this master plan community will hugely outperform some undifferentiated 3-bedroom, 2-bath house down the street in some builder subdivision.
So in a sense, then the well-known master plan premium is something that's earned. And does it sort of accrue, and does it increase over time if you indeed have executed it well? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that point is really self-proving if you just, again, in whatever part of the country you may be in, I mean, just think of the evolution of the master plans in your market, and you'll see that play out over and over again. A new master plan community opens. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Maybe they had a community little rec center and some houses, but it's nice. I mean, it's nice. And so it's doing well, but it gets better and better and better as it grows. And so that's the thing, is that, for a company like DMB, we spend so much time fussing about land planning and urban design and the landscape architecture and the unbelievable amount of energy that we put into residential community design guidelines and creating unique product for the community that our builders, the builders know if you come and build with DMB at this community, you're not going to be able to bring the same houses that you're peddling at the subdivision down the street. You're going to come and respond to our guidelines, create product for us.
I was literally just going to ask that question, is that you've set this vision, you know what you want to do with this master plan. Do you have to sort of wrestle with other folks, be they builders or cities or what? Do you have to wrestle along the way to maintain that division for the whole 8, 10, 15 years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the builder recruitment process in the early years is easily one of the most critically important parts of the process, because you have to find builders who fall in love with the vision and are going to, really dedicate themselves and their teams to being part of it. And, and so, but it pays off because again, I would just say if all I had is just some little subdivision, I try to get a builder to create specialty product for it. It'd be, look, get lost. Life's too short. Yeah. But if I've got a 10 or 15 year runway where guys, be part of this, you'll still be selling houses in here a decade from now.
Yeah. I will say this, though. Builders more and more, especially the major public builders, they are kind of winnowing their floor plans. That's kind of a trend right now. You see some of these big builders are cutting back on the vast variety of floor plans. Do you see that as maybe making it a little tougher for you? Or do you think that there's going to always be something that's going to fit what we need here?
Well, so here's what happens is, so not every builder is a good candidate for a DMB community. That's just the reality. And so in other words, if you're a big national builder and you've decided that your lane is high velocity, it is, basically the repetitive delivery of very, very similar product offerings, and you're just kind of a formulaic machine, you're not going to vibe very well with a DMB master plan community. I'll tell you who our favorite builders are. It's the builders who have a strong entrepreneurial culture, and thankfully, even among the big guys, those are still out there. And I'm not going to name names.
Yeah, of course.
but right, because I have to be friends with everybody.
Yes, for sure.
But the reality is that even among the big guys, some of them have the most wonderful entrepreneurial mindset when they think about something like this. And again, it has to make sense. There's got to be enough critical mass of business on the table to work with us, to say we're not just going to do the same old normal thing. We're going to do something special here, but it's worth it because, we can set up shop and make money here for a long time.
Are you ready, though, to pivot? If it's been a few years and you thought you had the right vision, have there been instances where, you know what, maybe we didn't call that exactly right? Let's pivot. Does that happen? Are you ready to do that?
Yeah. I mean, so the way I would describe it, I don't know that I could point to an example where it was like some kind of really abrupt pivot. But what absolutely happens is you get rolling. And in an organization like yours, John Burns does kind of a study for one of our projects, and they're recommending a product segmentation based on the customers that are out there, the demand that they perceive as is really possible for our project. And we may only have 7 or 8 segments, and you guys tell us you could be doing 14 segments, right? Consider doing green court. Consider doing 6-pack cluster product. And so it's like with every passing year, the world is changing. The market that you're part of is evolving. A lot of master plan communities start out kind of out on the edge of the metro, and as the years go by, the world comes to it. And so the frontier of what's workable keeps evolving as the community becomes more of a place you start to have more opportunity for mid-density and even higher density product. And so, and Dean, tastes and styles change. And so even our projects, many of them, the life cycle is so long that, maybe like I could point to some examples where, when we started them, Spanish colonial and Tuscan and things like that were all the rage. But by the time we get to the middle years, those have kind of gone by the wayside, and we're really into, modern farmhouse now, and so just like if we were a small town or a city, you're just constantly evolving and growing with the market, and we welcome that.
So what are those? What are the key ingredients that make for a vibrant master plan that DMB would want to put its name on?
So I love that question, and let me just answer you this way. One of the great realizations that I've had in my career, that DMB as an organization has had, is that the physical design of a community has a powerful impact on the sense of neighbor to neighbor vibrancy of the community. And to really simplify that, the vast majority of suburban single family neighborhoods that you'll find built around the country are really pretty abysmal in terms of kind of nurturing neighbor to neighbor relationships and engagement.
They close.
So the street scenes are the street scenes are sterile. The streets, it's basically a street lined with garage doors and driveways. And people don't hang out at the front of their home. They don't. They at the end of the workday, they turn onto their street and they start clicking the garage clicker, and the door rolls up and they pull in that garage. The door seals closed behind them. They're gone. And whatever, if there is any outdoor living going on, it's in the backyard. And they may occasionally, see a neighbor out front and kind of wave, but the anonymity that happens, where you may have lived on that street 4 or 5 years, and you may only know a handful of your immediate neighbors and not much more than that. It's just, and when the design of the community is such that basically to get to anything, you have to get in your car. That in itself, cuts off the opportunity for casual, spontaneous interaction between neighbors. And so what we found is that creating, we call it neighborhood crafting, where you say one neighborhood at a time within this vast master plan community, just one neighborhood at a time. Think through how to design beautiful street scenes, curb separated sidewalks, street trees, resident front of house architecture. There's a phrase that we use, and I need to credit Disney from all those years ago, because they're the ones who first said these words. But their thesis was that every home should offer a gift to the street. Right? Meaning, my house has this beautiful porch. Well, my house, it has this amazing walkway and this cool, but every house offers something to the street to help animate and enrich the street scene.
Was that why they went a lot of alley load? Because it does. A garage isn't the best streetscape. Was that?
Yeah, but look, sure, that was definitely part of it. But the thing of it is, we've learned over the years that even in kind of what we call front loaded, where the garage, you access the garage from the street, that you can manage the presence of that garage door, kind of out from being the primary element that you see when you drive down the street, right? And then you vary it from house to house, and some the garage turns sideways, and there's different things you can do. Some you push the garage to the back, but you're just trying to minimize the dynamic of garage doors and driveways is the dominant feature, and instead it's really delightful residential architecture. It's people's homes. The homes feel inviting and welcoming. And the street scene is so pleasant that it's pleasurable to just walk out your front door and walk. And then as master plan community developers, we create neighborhood parks. We decide where the schools are, where the amenities are, where the little neighborhood shopping opportunities are. And the goal is to minimize vehicle trips and maximize bikes, e-bikes, e-scooters, just walking over to the community center, walking over to meet friends. And Dean, sorry to rattle on, but look here, I get excited about this because here's what happens is if you and I live in the same kind of general part of the community, and I haven't seen you in a while, and you're out and I'm out and I see you over there. It's like, Dean, Brent, hey, God, I haven't seen you. Yeah. What's it been? A couple of months. Here's what happens. We'll chat. I mean, it'll be quick. It's like, well, everything good with you? Oh, yeah, everything's good with us. We just got back from a trip, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's awesome. It's so good to see you. Hey, have you guys tried the new restaurant? Have you guys seen the movie? Have you guys? And what happens is social promises are made. Yeah. Social promise. It's like, we should definitely do that. We haven't tried it. That sounds amazing. Let's do it. And now a social promise has been made. And if you think about it, every time that happens, the fabric of community gets woven a little tighter and a little tighter. And that sense of anonymity goes away. And it's like a positive self-reinforcing spiral when you get people interacting within a community.
It's funny you say that because where we live it's not what you're describing, to be honest. It's a little bit more like the traditional suburban thing. But my wife and I walk our dogs every evening, and exactly what you described, we do. There's some neighbors who are outside. Not everybody's outside, but some are. And there's a couple of folks, we stop and talk to them as we walk our dog on the way by, and we will do what you just said. We've literally done exactly that. Have you guys been to Microbrew? Blah, blah, blah. So that's, yeah. And so you're building a community where that just becomes more easier, more natural, more places to do that.
Yeah, I'm saying that dynamic is a design objective.
Okay.
When we're crafting the built environment, we're deciding what goes where. We're designing the individual neighborhoods and the homes in the neighborhoods and all those, aspects that are in the purview of a master developer, that the outcome we're looking for is a place where that happens all the time.
Do you ever worry about being maybe too aspirational and not, quote unquote, sellable enough? I mean, do you have to always want to be sure you're balancing that?
Well, that's a good question. And the way that I guess I'll focus on that is the balancing point that we have to constantly be careful about is that it is easy to get carried away and end up with houses that are just weirdly too expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you just start, you want all this front of house architecture and, you want curb separated sidewalks and you want street trees and you want this and you want that. And if you just keep adding hot fudge and sprinkles and maraschino cherries and whipped cream, and, you can end up in a place where it's magnificent, but you've kind of priced yourself uncomfortably out of the market. And so we have to, in every case, make judgments about, in this community, within the realistic budget constraints that our customers have, how can we serve up the finest crafted community that people are going to love living here and they can still afford to live here.
Walkability is hard in the suburbs. You kind of have to build it yourself. You do, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but you do quite a few mixed use where you have a significant commercial segment. Is that part of why you like to do mixed use, or do you do a lot of mixed use master plans? So you give the commercial provides that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, most of the most of the mixed use or non-residential development that we've done over the years is within our own communities. So that, which takes you back to the idiot across the street thing that I was talking about earlier. It's a pretty amazing thing to control thousands of acres of land and to have the vision to know that over a 20-year horizon, that I can set the table for the most perfect,
Yeah.
Here's going to be someday an incredible apartment site right next to the shopping and right next to the recreation center and right next to the school. And so when you have control over all of those land use decisions, and you can, on one hand, end up delivering an incredibly powerful community, but also benefit as the developer from just the inherent profitability of perfect placement, perfect timing of each of the land uses.
Brent, will you also think about apartment demand and rental demand and commercial demand that you would be impacted in what you build, given what you think the demand is going to be at that location? Is there enough demand for commercial for rental?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the way that we have to think about that is almost in terms of life stages of a project. So in other words, even if I do control thousands of acres and thousands of future housing units, in year one, we're a handful of houses and maybe some modest amenities. And so, right, you start adding rooftops. And it's interesting that a few years later, if assuming the community is successful, you now have enough rooftops to start to support your first increment of retail and kind of service uses, a dry cleaner, a veterinarian, the dentist's office, those kind of things, right? And a few years later, you get a grocery store. And with the grocery store comes a big drugstore, and then comes all the uses that you would associate with a neighborhood convenience center. And then a few years later, you start to see your first employment uses showing up. And so the objective that we always have is to understand those life stages, but have a master plan that grows into it accommodates all those needs. I'll share with you, I had a mentor many years ago who had a thought experiment that was very helpful to me. We were planning a very large scale community that would have someday a population of 20,000 people. And he said, go to the library. And this is back when you would go to a library, and and it was also back when they had something called yellow pages. But he said, go to the library and find the yellow pages of an existing town with a population of 20,000 people, and leaf through those yellow pages and just see all the incredible array of non-residential uses, services and businesses and stores and whatever that a town of 20,000 people requires.
Yeah.
And it's like once you have that in your mind and you're now back with your own master plan and thinking, okay, I mean, I don't have to plan, little, here's where the dentist is, here's where the brake shop is going to be. But what I do have to do is make sure that I have enough land reserved in the right places for all the uses this new town I'm creating is going to need.
Yeah.
Right.
And you'll hold on to that until you're convinced that use is not coming. Because sometimes you do see some of those little holes in master plans where they plan for X and X didn't come. But you're still going to be able to pivot there too.
Oh, yeah, because in other words, you're holding out land for, again, I'm just going to use the term non-residential. Mm-hmm. But I've never encountered a situation where there was not enough non-residential uses.
Yeah.
What it ultimately looks like 10 years later or something may be a little different than you imagined. And meanwhile, there's even things like churches and schools and recreational facilities, apartments, all kind of build to rent is a new use, new asset class that is finding its way into more and more master plan communities. So,
are you doing that? Are you putting, you have this village is going to have a section of it's going to have 7 neighborhoods. Hey, maybe one of those should be a BTR. Will you think about that?
Yeah, that's very much part of our land planning. And I'd tell you just the one comment about the build to rent product is that our experience has been that if you don't plan for it, you never tell anybody there's going to be any of it in your community, and then you just drop it in there. it creates stress. The builders or the neighbors are like, hey, what in the hell? No one told me there was going to be all these renters. But on the other hand, if in your original master plan you placehold for multifamily and for built-to-rent neighborhoods, and everybody clearly understands, and you're proudly, by the way, talking about the vision of this community, that this is a new town we're creating. We want homes for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? The classic school teachers and firefighters and police officers should be able to live in the same community as the people they serve.
All of our BTR clients will tell us the same thing demographically for their users. They are demographically so similar to the folks in the for sale neighborhood right across the street. So, you've been doing this for a very long time. What are you doing differently now at your developments that maybe you didn't do 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
Well, there's a few things. I mean, I think it's fair to say that we work very hard to craft flexibility. It relates to the conversation we were having earlier about how tastes and styles and market dynamics are constantly evolving. And so what we try to do is create a master plan that's beautifully crafted, but it is designed to be able to flex and accommodate changes. When we create residential design guidelines, we're forthright in describing it as a living document that is assuredly going to evolve over time. Because it's like you don't want to become a museum of the architecture of yesterday. And so there's that kind of wisdom, just embracing the need for flexibility and the ability for a good community to evolve. We just touched on, more inclusion of rental opportunity within the master plan. It's such an important part of a big, healthy community. I would tell you another thing is that and this is just a bias that we have, but we are not fans of the big, garish entry monuments and with the fake waterfalls and the big name of the community in giant letters, and to us we've evolved to a mindset that is so we use the term developery. It doesn't feel like a real place. It feels so contrived, and so we just in our hearts we think of what we're creating as having more in common with what'll someday be a thriving town than it is like a oversized subdivision with a fancy monument sign out front.
Will you try then to sort of, I don't know, interface with the surrounding community as much as possible? Or are you looking for it?
Absolutely. Yeah, Dean, thanks for asking that, because it's one of those dividing points where you could say, there are lots of developers who thoughtfully and for good reason, their objective is to stand apart.
Yeah.
We are an island. The people who will get to live here are the luckiest people in the world. Yeah. And we're trying to accommodate every need that they'll ever have right here in our island of a community. And and then there's the other category, which is more where we tend to be, which is there was a pre-existing community here. And there's a lot of cool things about most of the pre-existing communities we become part of. And so, rather than isolate ourselves from it, we try to imagine that in the fullness of time, that our arrival here is hugely additive to the larger community of which we are becoming a part, right? And we work hard on the social and civic engagement side to have strong relationships with the area business groups, the schools, the worship groups, the clubs, leagues, scouts, sports, all the infrastructure of community that exists, to be part of it, to bring new financial resources and volunteer energy to it, and kind of uplift the whole area that we're part of.
Would you still be gated though? Or have you?
It depends on the type of community, in some cases the location, but most of our big Well, in fact, all of our big planned communities are not gated. In some cases, we'll have a gated little area, like in some, like maybe there's a little golf enclave somewhere that has gates, or an active adult village that has gates, things like that. But
like Victory at Verado, this kind
not gated.
Really not gated, even though that's
not
within.
Gated.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but see, I'm glad you mentioned that one, Dean, because the interesting thing is that Verado, of all the communities that DMB has developed, it was from day one positioned to be kind of the town of Verado, and to feel like, look like. And it's actually very interesting. It was, at the time we started, it was way out on the edge of the metro. And there was a lot of debate and angst in the newspapers at that time about sprawl, about the plague of suburban sprawl, right? The creeping crud of sprawl. And I remember our chairman, Drew Brown, asked our planning team, can somebody please tell me what's not sprawl? Like, what could we do here that would not be judged to be sprawl? And we all thought about it, and we said, well, I'll tell you what's not sprawl is a neighboring town. Like, nobody thinks that Payson is sprawl, or Prescott is sprawl, or Wickenburg is sprawl. Nobody, those are towns, right? They're balanced in their uses, whatever. And it's like, yes, that's exactly right. And so we said, let's create a town. And so once we had committed ourselves to that, years later, we decided to create the Victory Active Adult Community. And it would have been just such an almost betrayal of our town building principles to suddenly throw up a gate and cordon off those people from the rest of this incredible community. And so, and Victory has been a huge success, by the way.
Yeah. So. I've actually been there. And I should have known it was 10 years ago. So
yeah.
So I didn't remember that it was ungated. That's a great segue. So Verado is an example of one of the, I don't know, for lack of a better term, the master plan types that DMB does. And the first one is sort of these larger scale master plans that I think are geared at pretty much all buyer segments, market niches. You do a lot of that. You do it very well. DC Ranch, all those things in Phoenix that you that we're familiar with, Marley Park, Eastmark, Verado, of course. When you do those, are you very consciously needing to get a lot of land though, because you do have to almost create a new town if you're going to serve that many segments?
Yeah, and so again, I wouldn't for 1 minute say that the decisions we're making about that are, right for anybody other than us. But our decision about how we're going to grow is that we specialize in very large scale planned communities that have a long life cycle. And again, just remember what I was saying earlier, that our business strategy is to control enough land that these master plan communities grow in value and the premium that they're achieving over the rest of the housing market grows and grows with every passing year. And so our worst nightmare would be if all we had is 1,000 units and we do our great placemaking and all that good stuff, and then you just run out of real estate before it had a chance to really kick and start to throw off those big premium values that we're really, focused on. And I have to tell you, one of the things about DMB communities, we have lots of consumers who follow the DMB brand, and it's partly, if you think of it, that's how we work. That's what we do. The smartest thing you can do is be an early buyer in a DMB community because you just stay with it a few years and it just keeps growing in value. It gets to be a better and better and better place. We're really good marketers. And
it's a pretty savvy buyer, isn't it? Who's conscious of that.
Yeah. It just, again, it tends to be people who've owned in a DMB community, or in many cases, it's the adult children of people who've owned in a DMB community. It's like, oh, you should check out this new place DMB is doing, and trust me, buy early because,
Buy early, buy often. One of the other ones I wanted to talk to you about in terms of this large scale, all segments kind of master plan is a newer one. I don't think it's even open yet. Is Silverwood in Hesperia, which is for those of you, it's Southern California. It's kind of the high desert of Southern California in the Inland Empire. It's going to be 9,000 acres, 15,000 planned homes. This is not Arizona. This is not Texas or whatever. This is California. Right. How were you able to pull that large scale off in a place like California where land is so precious?
Yeah, it's an incredible story. And the hero of the story, sadly, is not DMB. Mm. The hero of that story is a family out of Dallas. It's Bob and Myrna Schlegel. And I don't even remember how many years, 13, 14 years ago, they acquired this huge landholding. And it's very beautiful. It feels like a national park up there. It's right adjacent to Silverwood Lake. Okay. You know, the mountains surround it. It is truly a gorgeous piece of real estate. And they knew in their hearts that an incredible community could be developed there. And so, you know, they took on the challenge. And again, with no DMB, we were not in this story at this time. They took on the challenge of creating a master plan and going down the long path of entitlements, you know, planning entitlements, environmental litigation, environmental settlement, you know, got all the entitlements together. And at that point reached out to us to say, now we need the right developer, you know. And so, my God, I mean, we were so delighted, so wowed by the real estate. It's this is one of those things I would invite anyone, write it down and remind me I said it later, because I promise you I'm going to be right about it. Is Silverwood is going to completely change the perception of the so-called high desert.
Yeah.
And it's funny, that area is really actively rebranding as the Mojave River Valley.
Okay.
Because historically, for whatever reason, the high desert, in air quotes, has kind of taken on a less than desirable kind of connotation. But again, it is so beautiful. And it's, in terms of commuting time, you know, you could live on the floor of the valley down there and have a longer commuting time in minutes than it is to drive from Silverwood. But the difference is, when you come up to Silverwood, I'm telling you, it is like you click your blinker, you turn your steering wheel, you turn in the community, and you are looking at a panoramic billboard that feels like a national park.
But you're going to be serving all types. I mean,
everything.
Okay. Where's your demand going to be in terms of like jobs, commuter? Are the Northeast LA County? Are the Inland Empire itself? Is that what you anticipate?
Ultimately, it's all of the above. So one of the realities, I know you guys, you know, are very well aware of this, but the Inland Empire is radically undersupplied with attainable priced homes. It really is. It's just for all the reasons that California is so difficult to do business and the costs are so high. And so our objective has been to create this new community where, you know, I can't say the houses are like cheap, because they're not cheap, but they are going to create opportunities for thousands of families who are currently priced out of the housing market. And so that's a big part of the strategy.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those people currently live and work, you know, in Riverside and Rancho Cucamonga and Ontario, you know, et cetera. And they're living in apartments, or they're renting somewhere, and this is going to be their chance. Yeah. And so we'll sell a lot of houses to those folks. And as we move forward, we'll add an active adult component.
Okay.
And of course, those consumers will come from everywhere. And I would just say the Mojave River Valley is experiencing a pretty incredible growth trajectory in terms of job creation.
Okay.
And so, again, remember, we're in it for the long term. And so as the years go by, we will have more and more people living and working right up there in that area.
15,000. I mean, that makes a dent. In a place like California, where supply is so constrained and will be forever, 15,000 is meaningful.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, I'm really really excited about Silverwood. We just had our kind of ribbon cutting,
Okay.
whatever that was, 10 days ago or something, and in the first week of April is our official opening to the public,
Okay.
and
So sales will be beginning actual signed contracts pretty soon here.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I didn't know it was
just a
that near
couple
term.
weeks.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is, and it just I'm just gonna I don't want to curse it, but
I
it's just
know.
I feel really good about it.
Good.
So we'll
Good.
just leave it there and hope I'm right.
California needs it. As someone who's been here all my life, we need it desperately. Let's
Yeah.
pivot over to not the opposite. That's not the right phrase, but you also have a hand in a lot of very high end resort style developments in
Yes.
Tahoe with Lahontan and I think Martis Camp, which is gorgeous areas, Glen Wild and Park City. What's your, I don't know, your strategy there? Is that just to make sure you're hitting a lot of different niches and you're diversified, or it's because you really want to be in the resort space?
Well, it's just historically about, we've always described it as there are two hemispheres to our business. And the first is what we've been talking about so far, which is our big master plan communities. The other is our, high end, typically private club. Some are luxury primary home communities.
Yeah.
Some are in second home locations, but we love both. We've always worked on both, love both, and it's interesting that we think our work in the luxury sector, brings a lot of very interesting insight to the family market and vice versa. If I had to, I guess, kind of characterize what's important to us in our luxury communities, one is very, very, very special locations.
Okay.
Starts with that, and so not to get lost in this topic, but it's just there's a lot of beautiful locations. If you said, oh, there's a trout stream, there's a mountain, there, you could do the most beautiful community here, but the question is for it to be really viable. As a second home, like how do people get here?
Yeah.
How often can they drive to it? Like Martis Camp, people get in their car in the Silicon Valley and just drive right over there.
Yeah.
And so they could, leave on a Friday afternoon, spend the weekend at Martis and shoot back on Monday morning and, not miss a beat. Some are destination communities. Think of our project on the island of Kauai,
Yeah.
or the Mexico project as an example, and that's fine. But it needs to be a plane ride to a proper airport and then a rational kind of car ride from there to the place.
Okay.
If it's off out in the middle of nowhere, it's probably not a good site for us. There are other developers who work on the more remote stuff, but we like it's like a unicorn. It's an incredibly beautiful, compelling site that, oh, by the way, is accessible, for people to either drive to it or very quickly fly and drive to it.
Yeah. And for a hot minute there, I know Martis Camp, I actually did a study at Martis Camp as a comparable during COVID for a little while there. They were almost de facto more primary than secondary because they started living there in many cases because they, work from home, work from their gorgeous home. How about in terms of, you mentioned, so Mexico, so you've also gone overseas in the Baja Bay Club in Los Cabos? How is that experience working in a different country, different culture from the U.S.?
Well, first of all, it's been a really delightful experience. The piece of land is, I have to be careful because, developers, how we are, oh, this is the best piece of land. But in all honesty, in my career, this is arguably the best piece of land for a resort community I've ever seen. It is on the Sea of Cortez.
Yeah.
If you know the Cabo area, for all the many wonderful things that Cabo offers, swimmable beaches is not something they're known for because, right, especially the Pacific facing
Pacific side,
coast.
forget it. You're going to die. You're going to drown.
Yeah,
So
it's
you want
rocky.
to
Right, and so this particular site has a 3.5 mile long white sand crescent beach, wind protected, with a sandy walkout. So it's not one of those rocky shorelines where it hurts your feet to get in the water. It's a sandy beach, and the beach is so deep that it's ranges from about 500 feet deep to 1,000 feet of call it the width of the beach from the shoreline. And so we're creating this incredible luxury community where these fabulous custom homes will be oriented immediately to the beach, where you can just walk right out of your house onto sugar white sand.
God.
And we're doing a David McClay Kidd golf course, and which I am such a fan of his design, and he is so much the right designer for this site because he loves to embrace nature. He describes designing one of his golf courses as taking a handkerchief and just letting it settle over the land, as opposed to gouging into the land and shaping and berming and all that kind of stuff. I mean, he just works with the land. And this site is so beautiful. It would be a travesty to have that other golf design philosophy kind of insinuated onto this land. So
you guys have this light touch on the land that's just infused in all aspects. Without even you saying it, what you just said there is clearly a different way of doing a golf course than a lot of other golf courses at Massapons you'll see.
Yeah, no, it is. And again, I always have to remind myself, I mean, there's a lot of smart colleagues of ours in this business, and not everybody thinks the way we do, and they do what they do for different reasons than, and so again, not passing judgment on what anyone else does, but I will say that if you go back to where I started, that for us, our site selection process, it always begins with a spectacular site.
Yeah. And
once you have one of those, the instinct to say, God, let's not be the guys who screw this up.
Yeah. But you have made it, you've improved. I think in Santa Luz in San Diego area, you planted a lot of trees and you did kind of improve upon the landscape.
And so, you're right. And the funny thing about Santa Luz is that, and that I have to acknowledge that they first started working on that one just before my arrival. Okay. But they found on that site one scraggly tree. To be generous in using the word tree, there were some big boulders and a tree on this entire site. And so that's the hand we were dealt. What was magical about that site was the San Dieguito Valley and the unbelievable location of it, where you're just surrounded by some of the finest communities in Southern California and the mountain views. And so the site was spectacular, but it just was denuded of any meaningful tree cover or anything for us to work with. And so it ended up having to involve bringing in a lot of trees and, created landscapes.
And the last resort, and then we'll talk about it's qualified in Storyliving in just a second, but the last resort is, and I'm going to ask you this only because I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's in Kauai and it's Kukui'ula?
Yeah, you got it right.
Okay, I have to end every Hawaiian word with a question mark because that's. Do you remember the movie with Nicolas Cage? It was Honeymoon in Vegas, where he's trying to find his lost fiance, and he's saying, "Is that kapa'a kapa'a?" That's me with Hawaiian words. So Kukui'ula. That's Kauai is gorgeous. So is that something, I know it's not overseas, obviously, but was the idea there also just because you found this amazing piece of land? What's the
Yeah.
story behind that
Yeah,
one?
we weren't actively looking for a site over there, to be honest. The we had a partner there. It's what's called one of the big five in Hawaii. It's Alexander and Baldwin,
Oh, okay.
and so they were one of the largest landowners. Several 100,000 acres of land in Hawaii. They owned the shipping company, and so anyway, diversified, publicly held, long established, more than 100-year-old company. And this site used to be a sugarcane plantation where the workers lived on it. So it's not like it was ag land. It was a
Yeah.
plantation where generations of people grew up on this land. And, at some point, long before, we were ever involved, sugarcane in Hawaii became diseconomic. They just, right, they started making sugar out of beets rather than cane, and growing in Costa Rica and other places that were cheaper than Hawaii. And so there came a point where Alexander and Baldwin, who are wonderful corporate citizens, kind of had to communicate with the state of Hawaii that, guys, I mean, we can't keep doing this. I mean, we're losing money year over year. We're going to have to shut this thing down. And they kind of struck a deal that it's like, well, look, give us a little bit of runway to help these families transition out of here, and we'll work with you on some kind of entitlements to allow you to move this thing into development whenever you're ready. And so they had this incredible piece of land that had entitlements, and they invited us to be their developer partner. And and off we went, and it's just a magnificent community. We're so very proud of it.
I want to ask you, Brent, two questions on your partnership with Disney and Storyliving. One will be just sort of just the kind of the germination of that relationship. And then two, we'll end with, you have a couple of those communities are fairly near term. Let's just hear a little bit about those. So first, how did that start, this relationship with Disney?
Yeah, no, it's a very easy story. So I just got a phone call one day, and it's funny because when the guy called me, I assumed he was calling because he knew, like, maybe that I had worked on Celebration all those years ago. But in fact, no, he had no
Really?
idea. All it was is that the Disney team had, I don't know how long before, maybe as much as a couple of years before I got that phone call, they started focusing on this notion of doing, Disney branded communities.
Yeah.
And where they were coming from is just really thinking in the most aspirational way about what they could bring to the table, you know. So this wasn't the way they thought about it, just to be clear, but just between us as real estate people, you could think of the emergence of something like Margaritaville, which has
Okay.
been a highly successful, branded community. So it's not hard to imagine Disney, thinking about kind of the same thing and saying, my God, I mean, think of what we could bring to the table.
Yeah.
And so when you imagine, like, we all think of Disney's animated movies and the theme parks and things like that, but my gosh, I mean, the Disney organization, I don't know, they own ESPN,
Yeah.
they own National Geographic, right?
They're diverse. Yeah.
They own ABC. Just the range of things and content that they own is so vast, and so they had started to formulate, some clear ideas about this notion of getting into the community development space. But I'm very pleased that they thought about it and said, well, look, sure, we could bootstrap our own development company internally. They had done it before, but they thought, but that's really not the space where we add value. It's like, why wouldn't we just align ourselves with a developer who's really good at this? And, but we got to find the right one, that we can really have good creative chemistry and this shared commitment to quality. And so they started just asking around, just talking to people in the industry. And it's like, who's out there doing stuff. And thankfully, our name kept coming up. And we weren't the only one. I have to be very clear. It wasn't like, oh, you should totally, the only company you should talk to is DMB. But our name did keep coming up. And thankfully, they heard it enough times that they decided to call. And that it started there. And they downloaded, kind of what their thoughts were. And I got very excited. And of course, because I'd worked with them before, I knew what that organization is capable of. And so it really became an incredible creative relationship where we started to look at sites together and imagine, community concepts. And so, as you pointed out, we first focused on what's now known as Cotino, which is the project in the Palm Springs area. Mm-hmm. And then the second community we've announced is in the Raleigh, North Carolina area called Asteria.
Before we get to that, Brent, I did want to ask you one thing. What is it? Just big picture. What are the aspects that'll make these communities Disney branded? I'm assuming it's not roaming pirates or parades or something like that. What's going to make them, clearly Disney versus another community? Yeah.
So it's a really important question you're asking, because I think anyone could be forgiven if all you read is a headline that Disney is creating communities, and it's like you close your eyes. All right, what would a Disney community? And you start imagining, animated characters. But here's the truth: the Disney organization is, without doubt, the finest placemaking organization on the planet. The Walt Disney Imagineers have skills in the planning and urban design and landscapes and, resort. It just goes on and on. And I'm telling you, someone who's had the great pleasure of being in the rooms with them, watching their creative process and whatever. It is staggering, the talent, the experience that they draw from. And their big notion here is that we're going to create communities that are all about localness. So you can imagine how that resonated with me, as we discussed earlier. So we want everyone to be a one of a kind. It is all about that place. These are beautifully crafted communities. They will have wonderful location driven amenities. And it's going to be different in every one they ever do, whether it's with us or others in the years to come. Every one will be different. And so there's no formula. And, we've talked about it as almost like writing a love letter to a place. So if we're working in Palm Springs, if we get it right, Cotino should feel like Disney wrote a love letter to the greater Palm Springs area. We fell in love with it. It's an interesting part of the history of Cotino that Walt Disney himself, Walt and his wife Lillian, over the years owned 3 different homes in Palm Springs. And in fact, the first one that they built, Walt chose to sell to help raise the money he needed to build Disneyland. And when Disneyland opened and became successful, he immediately came right back and built another house in Palm Springs. So there's a lot of Disney history in that market. And so, but if I jump to the other side of the country, I can tell you where there weren't necessarily Disney roots in the Raleigh area. The process was the same. It was spending the time that most developers don't or can't spend to get out there on the ground and understand that region, fall in love with it, and think about how do you craft a community that feels like the highest expression of this place, right? And so So I guess what I'm getting at is that it's not like there's a punchline to what a Disney community is. It's they have a choo-choo train that goes around the edges or something. It's nothing like that.
So it's not going to be, you're in a Disney community because they have a monorail. It's more going to be, gosh, this is a really well planned community with amazing sense of place that has a lot of creativity behind it.
And incredible amenities and facilities, but incredible programming. And so part of the big vision for Storyliving by Disney relates to just the thought that all of us are best when we're lifelong learners, when we're always curious, and so if you think about what the Imagineers bring to the table, what the Disney organization as a whole brings to the table, that, I don't know, just, use your imagination. Okay, on Wednesday, the Nat Geo explorers are just back from Antarctica, and, they're going to come and talk to our residents about their experiences there, show photography and video clips, and do a live Q&A and, what it was like, and, that kind of, so just, you think of the kinds of enrichment programming that Disney can bring to the table that really no one else can.
I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting. And at least for the first two, Cotino and Asteria, tell me if I'm wrong. They're partially age restricted. Both of them are not wholly age restricted. Do I have that right?
That's correct. Okay. And so look, the basic notion of it is that we are passionate believers in the stage of life that I'm going to describe is think of it as kind of the empty nest and beyond. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit different than saying we want to run out and do retirement communities. Yeah. The reality is that today's 55-plus-year-old consumer is a very different cat than the prior generation. The World War II generation, when they reached retirement, it was like scoring a touchdown. Yeah. It was like, I've made it. I did it. Burn the mortgage. I'm throwing away the alarm clock. My life is my own. I can do what I want. Right. And so retirement was a thing to be celebrated. And boomers are almost the opposite, where they're fighting age with every ounce of their being. They want to look young, feel young. They want to be mentally and physically vibrant and alive, and they're just wired differently. And so, a way of encapsulating that is to say that boomers and the leading edge of Gen X, who, by the way, are now aging to the 55 plus, that they are not interested in capitulating to age and making the decision to move to like somebody's retirement, their active adult community, the retirement community, if it's any of those kind of formulaic places. That is a decision. That is a capitulation that I'm ready to live in an age segregated life. Yeah. I don't want to be where kids are. I don't want to be where young adults are. I want to be in this age segregated world, whatever. And boomers ultimately, and the leading edge of X, they'll all get there, in time. It's just, they may be well into their 70s when they get there.
Yeah.
And so what we're thinking about is a community that it doesn't feel like that. It by no means does it feel or seem like a capitulation to age. It is celebrating. If you think of it, people reach the empty nest. It's the most awesome time, because for most of us, it's like we're at or near our peak earning years.
Yeah.
The kids, all the financial and time burdens of child rearing has kind of started to melt away. And so we have more resources, more time on our hands. And we're all starting to think, what now? What now with our lives?
It seems a little bit like a leading edge, too. I think we're going to see more of that. We're already seeing more of that with some other folks, too. We're going to be a little bit more age targeted, maybe a little less age restricted for all those reasons, most of them psychological that you just said.
Now, look, I think that's it. And so we want people to be able to make a decision. I'd love to own a home at Cotino in Palm Springs, or it's in Rancho Mirage in the Palm Springs area.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to do that, and they can decide, all right, I mean, Cotino, there's all kinds of different people who live at Cotino. It's not all, age restricted or whatever. And I can just decide, do I want to live on a street with others more or less in my same age cohort? And there's a lot of folks who do, right? Because it's no fun if you happen to be lucky enough to be retired, it's no fun to wake up and watch everybody's garage doors open and they back out of their driveway and they're off to work.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there feeling kind of isolated. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
To live on a street with others who are similarly situated, but at the same time to be part of a broader community where when you go down to the private club and go to the bar, eat in the restaurant, go play sports, whatever you're doing, that you're in a multi-generational environment. And I'll give you one more thing that is, I think, such a powerful thing that Disney kind of brought to the table, which is that if you think of it, I'll bet you could relate to this, is the first generation of helicopter parents is now aging into the empty nest. So I don't know about you, when I grew up, trust me, my parents were not helicopter parents. No. If I had baseball practice, I rode my own damn bicycle to it. Right? I mean, and if we were sitting in the house, my mother would, that TV's rotting your brain, get out there, go outside, go do something.
Yeah.
So we were more feral children, back in that generation. And today it's not like that.
Yeah.
The kids are highly programmed, highly chaperoned. It's just a different world. And you have to ask yourself, the helicopter parents who have this deep, deep level of involvement with their kids. Those kids become young adults and off they go to college and now they've started their first jobs. Is there any chance in the world that those helicopter parents are going to make a decision to move to a typical active adult community where their own adult children and grandchildren do not want to spend time?
Yeah.
Who wants to go hang out with mom and dad at their retirement community and sit in the living room and listen to the clock tick, or God help you, be taken to lunch at their little club and get the hairy eyeball from all the surrounding tables that you brought your grandchildren in here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our, the Disney, I think what Disney brings to the table is the ability to create a community that's delightful for people who are at that empty nest and whatever, but where their adult children and their grandchildren beg to come. They can't wait to come.
So it can't hurt to have a monorail. I'm just saying, I'm not pushing a monorail, but I don't know. Let's just think about it. Brent, let me ask you one last question. Just what's next? Is there something you're just kind of excited about that DMB is doing that's on the horizon besides the Storyliving thing?
Yeah, no, I have to say, at this point in our company's history, our hands are very, very full with what we have on our plates. And I can tell you that, there's not some big new thing that we're currently scheming, but I can tell you with equal confidence, just knowing the history of the company, that just stay tuned.
Okay.
So
yeah, there will be.
We're always up to the next thing, and it'll be great, whatever it is.
See this space in the near future. Brent, thank you so much for coming on. This has been, I say this every time, but I mean it every time. I always learn a ton and always hear something that I didn't expect to hear. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, listeners, too. This has been Dean Worley with the New Home Insights podcast. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.